I would like to know your name. So it would be good to go around just shortly, no more than 10 seconds. You can mention your name and your position at Orange, and maybe if you're outside Jordan, you can say your position. Actually, you can mention where you are from. It would be good for me to know. I like to know the names. And it would be great if the names are in front of you, so that at least I'm hoping that you're not trying to throw me off. Please. Great. Who will that again?
Yunus Womandi, HR Director.
Sorry.
Hassan Bantour, Robert Enterprise Services.
Great.
Sami Krishan, Sales Support as Performance Director, and I'm from
Great.
Security Services Director.
Great.
Wissam Ahmed, Supply Chain Director.
Great.
Marketing
Fantastic.
Salah Provost, Communication Administrator.
Wonderful.
Mobile Marketing Director.
Okay.
This one and that.
Very good.
Yes, Marketing and Performance Analysis Director.
Very good.
Hello,
You're the big boss.
Yeah.
He's always.
أيمن سمحان Networks Engineering.
Very good.
So good morning, my name is Arun. Finance Government.
Very good.
Good morning. Very good. Product.
Very good.
So good.
Thank you. I think we missed somebody.
And the
Very good. Anybody we missed? Yes. Great. Fantastic. Great to be here with you. You have been doing the other modules. The strategy module is important topic in most companies, and probably doesn't get the attention it deserves. Let's see, I already introduced me. So it's always good to lay down what we're going to learn and why we're going to learn it, because it's important at the beginning, and then hopefully at the end we have achieved those by the end of the day. So let me walk you through these. See if I get my hardware in order. Okay, so our learning objectives at a high level, we have 4. We want to understand that the strategy formulation is about making choices on how and where you compete. And that is different from a strategic planning. One of the things I hope it actually sparks some debate, because not everybody accepts this distinction. Second learning objective, we want to understand that a strategy implementation is about aligning the strategic vision of the company with operations on the ground. Third, we want to understand that a strategic competitiveness is about establishing differentiators that matter to customers. As easy as that to say, and as common understanding that it's often not really well executed. And learning objective 4 is understand that for alignment, this alignment to work, business strategy must drive the value chain of the company, its technical infrastructure and information infrastructure, and that decisions in a top-down and bottom-up fashion must more or less coalesce together. Then at a lower level, we want to translate these into specific learning objectives. Our first specific learning objective, we want to understand the 4 elements of a strategy formulation, and integrating them is key to competitive success. I will explain what that means later.
Second learning objective is that we must understand that differentiators that matter to customers have to be linked to the value chain and technical infrastructure through the strategy triangle. That's one of the frameworks. I love the notion of frameworks. Why? Frameworks in life help us make sense of reality and also give us a roadmap. If you have a strategy, more or less, it can guide us. And the framework is higher than that because it helps us have a mental model of what we are experiencing. Third, we must understand that strategy implementation is about, I can't read, okay. Okay, is about aligning a strategy with its operation by linking differentiators to non-negotiables. This is something we want to kind of take away throughout the day, and I'm pretty sure that you've read the article that we gave you, and that article kind of highlights some of the things I'm going to talk about, but today we're going to go deeper. And then we want to also understand that a company must have this robust learning system in order to link its differentiators with non-negotiables so that there is a loop and information is being fed back, and hopefully we're making adjustments as we go on. And then finally, understand that most companies' strategies need maintenance, or what I call realignment, because to emphasize that a disciplined growth process is needed as you go through your stages of growth in the company. And then this always works much, much better if you have good insight into customer behavior. All of this at this point, obviously, is just big words, but they will hopefully become more and more clear as we go through the day. I think we have some additions I would like to hear. I think can you tell us, everybody just mention their name and their position in the company.
My name is Fabiana. I work in the enterprise unit that they B2B with Select.
Great,
I'm responsible for the planning and performance.
very good.
So I'm not B2B customer care.
Fantastic. Well, yes. Thank you. Great. Who's getting married? I heard somebody getting married. Okay, I have to wish. Maybe we have to be celebrating all day. Okay.
We have another someone in the group.
Oh, yeah.
He's already married.
That's going to be a strategic, realignment in your life. I promise you. Okay, so the agenda for the AM or more or less in the morning roughly is we will talk about what is a strategic formation, and this is where a strategic thinking comes in. We will basically walk through, is this really strategic planning or not? Or what do we mean by what, where, and how to compete? And we want to kind of understand that because competing in the market is kind of an uncertain activity, we want to make it clear that it requires management skill and leadership, and that's why we need to focus on it. And that's why it's different from a strategic planning. And then we move on to the strategy implementation, and the rest of the day, more or less, is about implementation, and then, of course, ongoing. So the morning, more or less, about alignment, and we use, more or less, I'm a history buff. I'm interested in history. I will bring this history about Napoleonic Wars, and then we walk into the morning framework, one of the main frameworks called the strategy implementation as alignment in a triangle, and you will see how that is. And then we will also look at the fact that for alignment to work, these three things have to be linked together. And then we will look at these two cases for illustrating this. And here we will look at the case of Southwest Airlines in order to see how that works. These are mini cases that you're going to read more or less in teams. So that's one of the things also. It's only interacting with the material through class discussion, but particularly through the team. And then one of you or two of you will discuss this, and then we will make it a team discussion, also collective discussion.
So also that's more or less the way we're going to handle the morning. In the afternoon, we're going to focus on realignment. So as good as implementation is, over time, companies tend to drift. You will see what that means. And then therefore, in order to make this work, we need to address what we call realignment, which emphasizes discipline and focus. How do you get that? By having an approach that's systematic, talking about learning curve effect, complexity, handling complexity. How do you handle the speed? How do you handle strategic clarity? We will look at the case of Nike. And then how do you, the second part of this, you need to get a deeper understanding of your customers. You used to know maybe your customers, but we will see that in order to succeed in an ongoing basis, you need to go deeper, understand them better. And the tool you have is being able to segment customers better, being able to address after segmenting, getting a growing share of the wallet, and then if possible, you can even see what the customer's plans for expansions are, and then more or less from there, grabbing a great share of the wallet. The case we will use is American Express, and then we do wrap up. So more or less, this is for the agenda for the day. Any questions, comments before we proceed?
A question about strategy in general. Is it also like short? Is there any short term, for example, strategy only or long term strategy or something in the future that needs time to be? Can you do, for example, 4 months or 1 year for that strategy?
That's a good question to ask after we've gone through the first one. So please re-ask that, because I feel like I will steal the show from myself if I start answering that now. So it's very good. I don't want to steal the show from myself. Okay. Please bring that up. I'm not trying to duck the question. Okay, first. Every time you hear the word strategy, often the word planning comes up too. So we kind of want to see, okay, what's the strategy, what's planning, do these go together? So as a way of warming up to the first part, let me ask this question. Let me ask for a show of hands. If I ask you, a strategy development and a strategic planning are similar. So I used to ask the first two answers, agree, disagree, and then a lot of people ask for, well, I want to be the third baby. So I want to ask the third as well. So how many people agree? I want to show of hands. Nobody thinks they're similar. Similar. 1, 2. Depending on.
You told us the answer at the beginning.
Well, you can assume you did it. My answer, but your answer could be different. I'm trying to convince you. Maybe you're not convinced. Maybe, that's the whole point. I'm trying to convince you. Okay, so number 2, disagree. Wow. Okay, maybe I don't have anything to do. That's great. 3, 1, 2. Okay. I think you voted in the last one. What's going on? You can vote twice. This is what they used to say in the US in the beginning of the century, 1920s, 1920s. They used to say, vote early and vote often. Okay. Interesting. So do we have 19 people in class right now? Anybody did not vote? That's good. Usually there are a couple of people who hold out. They don't want to vote. They want to keep their options open. Right? Okay. So what interesting contrast, right? I usually don't have this. So I'm happy to see that a lot of you don't think these are similar. And then some of you think they are similar, some of you kind of they have doubts. It's good. It's good. This is going to be interesting discussion. So let's proceed, see where we're going to go with this. what's a strategic planning?
Yeah, it's a question. Not enough coffee.
Maybe with
A long-term.
some action, how to implement the strategy.
Okay, some actions. Okay, I like that.
Long-term view of the action, a long-term plan,
Long term.
design for what you want to do.
Design, did you say?
Yes.
Design for what you want to do. This is not what they want. You want to do. Okay. I think that's good. What I want to put forward is that the strategy and planning are really not the same. And then let's kind of dig deep a little bit and see what does that mean, because obviously some of you already don't think so, which is good, but some of you think it is. So I'm trying to convince the ones who think it is, and I'm trying to add more data and ammunition for the people who believe so, and the maybes hopefully will come over, right? So a strategy is more about almost a game of chess, in the sense that unless you're a grandmaster, if you enter a chess game, you probably don't know who's going to win. If you watch the Netflix series, you know, what was it called? The Gambit, right? And you know that every game is on an uncertain outcome. But you have to think of a strategy like that. While planning is often not like that. Planning has often, at least we think, there are a set of standard outcomes, or maybe not standard, but at least we know fairly certain what they are. So let's say a company wants to establish a few new things that it hasn't thought about. We are planning to do the following things. We are trying to more or less have an initiative that about customer experience. So we have an app, you know, we try to engage our customers in a certain way, and this app is our entree to do that. Or we want to set up a new plant, or we want to establish a new branch. We want to grow talent. We have a learning and development initiative, and you know, this is more or less for us to plan for that. What we want to understand is that these are very important corporate activities, right? And these are already part of the strategy that probably is given, but these are not a strategy development because their outcomes is fairly certain, and you are basically planning the activities to execute. And then you kind of ask, okay, well, so what? Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Because I have to get my terminology right first. And if in some ways, sometimes you have to unlearn what you've learned before, because a lot of us in a corporate world equate a strategic planning with a strategy development. Now, then kind of say, okay, we can get on with it, Bijan, fine. So I will tell you, of course, I'm not the only one, is that strategy is about more or less playing in a field. A field, what do I mean by that? In a market. But how do you play in a market? By making choices, doing some things and not doing other things. It's very important to be clear that strategy is as much about what you're going to do as about what you are not going to do. Because one of the best ways to create lack of competitive advantage is to try to do everything. Focus is key. In addition, right, you want to make these choices in an integrated way because they have to work together. If you decide, I want to go to this market and play like this, and these are the specific 2, 3, 4 choices I have to make, you have to fit together. You can't have a situation where they are at odds with each other. By the way, kind of being on purpose, kind of general, because I want to make some definitions, and then we will look at the example of the airline to make this clear. And then that way, hopefully this will help you win. But also, we want to be clear is that winning is not certain. You make choices, that those choices may or may not result in winning. So in a way, if you want to think about it, a strategy is about developing a theory about your company and how it's going to play, but a theory is a theory. Unless it is tested in the market. Therefore, it's untested. Now already you should be thinking about, this is a little different than planned. So, by virtue of saying that, we are going to play in this market, not in this market. Therefore, because we think that here, there are things that we can bring to that market that probably competitors can't, or at least that's our theory. And then we are going to do this and that, but we are not going to do these other things. So choice is key. I'm emphasizing this because most people don't think of a strategy as making choices. Yes.
What did you say about the theory is untested theory? And I understand that the strategy should come from our mature understanding of the market dynamics, competition, and all these stuff. And even it should come from our vision. So why are we saying that it's a theory? Okay, I understand it's a theory, but then it's untested, it's difficult. Maybe at market.
Good point. So, yeah.
Should be proven.
Yeah, so in a way, so what I'm saying is untested in a sense that you may have, let's say,
Usually the strategy that you said is untested.
usually
the strategy that you plan to put into theory is not tested. Might have been, part of it might have been tested somewhere, but usually whatever you put on the ground is not tested. So you might try to start in practice to test it.
that's a good point. So in a way, that's part of the answer. Yes.
There is a rule. That's why part of your study is still working on them is correct.
Well, okay, I'm not going to answer in detail these, but I want to say, so more or less, I want to say, look at it like this. Let's say I am a handset developer, and it turns out that, Apple developed a handset, Nokia developed handsets, mobile handsets. And then I am OI, and I'm in China, and I'm developing handset. Just because what Apple did and, Nokia did, and then they decided to do certain things and other things, doesn't mean mine is going to work. I'm in China, and then I'm exporting maybe to the rest of the world. I have all kinds of uncertainties. That's clearly has to be in the equation. So that's the way I'm calling it contest. Okay. But it has to be clear though that it is like that, right? It makes sense?
Yes.
Okay. So now, what we are saying is that we're going to do these things better than others. And by doing those better than others, we definitely think that the customers would say yes. This is working. But we will see now that unless the strategy is coherent and doable, you probably are not going to succeed. Now, let's see, what do you mean doable? This is strategy. Yeah, but just because you thought about it doesn't mean it's doable, and that's where the testing comes in. You can sit, it's like, you know, when I'm in the shower, I dream of all kinds of, I want to be Elon Musk. Okay, go be Elon Musk, but can you be Elon Musk? Is it doable? Right? So, so it has to be coherent as also. Coherent means that it has to fit together. Right? So I'm emphasizing these things because we will see how sometimes companies don't necessarily do this well. So so at the end of the day, what we want to be clear is that if you accept what I said about theory, then you say that theory has to be translated into the specifics in a specific case. And therefore, for us, we want to be able to translate into actions, and those actions have to be resulting in the things we hope to get. And therein lies, I keep talking. So, but then it kind of thinks, well, okay, you're saying all these things to me, but why do managers then often think about and focus on a strategic, what I call planning, rather than do these other things? And that's because usually a strategic planning is something that most managers are inclined to do. We want to build a new plant. We want to roll out a new major IT application. We want to hire new staff. We want to establish a new this division. But notice, at least from my point of view, this is not strategy. This is a plan to do things. Yes, we want to do this, we want to do this, we want to do this, we want to do this. But of course, in a corporate environment, you can't have chaos, so you want to plan them. That's simple. Another way of looking at a strategy, and therefore a strategic planning, is that for planning, your goal often is controlling cost. What do I mean by that? The way you spend money, what you spend money on, how you spend money, are these really worthy of spending money on, etc. And then in a way, who is the customer for this? You are the customer in the company. Because you're the customer, you know your employee, you know yourself. Yeah, it's not rocket science. Definitely, there's an element of, let's say, a little uncertainty, but most of this is something you know a lot about. On the other hand, in terms of strategy, it's actually not you who are the customers, it's the customers that are out there. So in a way, you want to you're specifying outcome you want to achieve in order to succeed, and then more or less it focuses on your products, and hopefully customers are going to come and buy them. So do you control your customers? Okay, but not internal customers out there. Really, I'm asking the real question. Do you control your customers? Yes.
More than amounts, essentially, affecting the behaviors, the perception of
The operative word there is affecting their behavior, right? You see how you are everywhere yourself are kind of careful to choose your words.
You do advertising, you offer discounts. Or you do I like, you see how immediately you use words, your brain just immediately kicks in because you know you can.
So. I am YouTube, yes. I think, influencer on the media, yes, I can do for the. But maybe a small operator or operator, he has a limited choice. There is a market, price, other options that the customer can, some people know that much. They have other options. They have options. We're talking about control.
Yeah, so I feel like even influencers, at the end of the day, influencer can tomorrow morning lose his or her influence, something comes out and it turns out, he or she was lying about something or got paid off, or, like they were hiding something. I mean, what's happened to, Kanye West, and then, overnight, he went from being a major influencer to a, so we want to be clear about that. See, that's what I'm saying. I don't
seem like people, I'm talking about big OTA companies like YouTube, Facebook, they can control crowd of people. And I'm not talking about the influencer, the people that's fine is using.
I'm going to take that question a little later, because I want you to think about what you mean when you say big control. Because that's important. I think that's debatable, but let's come back after we finish the case. So you're keep asking questions, I'm asking you to put them aside, right? So you're gonna have lots of questions by then. I have to pay you off not to ask.
But you said that it's for all sales, right? Still,
Yes,
for example, for our customers.
correct.
I want to do a strategy for example,
That's a strategy. I'm talking about company strategy. Again, planning for a new IT security protocol, not a strategy.
yeah, but also not talking about plans. Planning is related to certain projects. Strategy contains all the values of the company that needs to be.
But the word you want to see, this is why I'm trying to ask you to use the word strategy in the context of competition very carefully. Very important. See, it's like the word innovation. I teach innovation, right? Innovation, you can go to talk to people and everybody talks about innovation. Right? So overused words, that's a problem with overused. What happens is that everybody has the word innovation. So what I'm saying is that company strategy or competing in the market in a distinctive way and trying to win applies. Rather than me saying, in other words, I know you should think of the general people and somebody says, I want to have a strategy to go on a vacation with my wife. Okay, yes, that's clearly saying that I want to plan a vacation. I mean, I'm making fun of it, but you see what I'm saying? The word strategy has to be very carefully used after today.
But is it related that planning strategy contains also several streams, not one stream, for example, that's the difference between planning, because planning is focusing on one stream or one direction.
You have a very good point. Yet, taking the word, you have to choose your words carefully. So, let's say, if you are talking about, company winning in a market, I think that's very clear.
For example, in security, our battle is to win against the attack. Choice. You can take choice to options. Someone making 100% security Okay, I'm not, very historic.
I want you to hold off on that. I'm gonna answer you one more, and then hopefully you see. But if not, then we will have to wait on today. So Google, what business are they in? What business are Google in?
Service provider, example,
No, but what business are they in? Very clear.
advertising.
Thank you. They are not in the business of security, but they have to enable the advertising by security. Exactly. They are in the advertising business specifically, and how do they compete? By providing an integrated approach, and this is how they compete. They compete very differently from billboard advertising. And they have security their own. But security is not their strategy. It's how they compete in the advertising. Because to me, you have to be very clear, otherwise everything is a strategy. And if everything is strategy, what is not strategy?
Let's say, so, depending on what we are talking about. We're talking about this.
What I'm talking about, company strategy in competing in markets.
This is- Should be specific.
I am very specific.
I'm talking about how to do a business. What is, or business. Yes, or business.
I agree. 100%. Thank you for articulating.
Because we are building and working on things that all the group, for example, and others, talking about strategies, so we should.
So what is my mission here? My mission is to make sure when you're talking about company strategy, you use the right approach as opposed to using security strategy, which you really think I want to plan for security to improve. That's very different. Okay. Yes.
So back to the calling our customers, and I think we don't discuss my beliefs that the commodity market, I think somehow we can control it.
Let me challenge you on that. So if you want so you typical telecom are in monopoly one, or is let's say oligopolistic market because there are multiple players, but they're very few. Then therefore, how do I compete that allows me to increase my revenue and my cost? Where do I compete? What are the things I want to bring to the market? So in a way, what we are saying is that at a certain level, if you are satisfied with where you are and you want to stay the same, you're okay. But you want to expand, you want to do things, and you want to improve your competitiveness. That's the question. So in a way, again, I want to link everything back to your definition of strategy, because the strategy has to be something that helps you continuously to improve your position. That's the point. Otherwise, even in Lebanon, we have Regie. Regie is a company that makes tobacco, it's a government company, and then they have their own cigarettes. And what's fascinating is that over time, it's one of the most successful government agencies, because over time they have become much more modern. They used to have this very poor packaging, but now it looks like Winston, and it looks like Marlboro. Okay, why? They realize they have a monopoly. You can't imagine, Regie in Lebanon is a perfect monopoly. They get all the tobacco and they use it, right? And then therefore but they have realized that they're losing market to the private companies from abroad. So they have to. That's this. Okay. So what's the essence of this is that we want to be clear that rather than, it is much easier for us to plan a factory or add personnel. But if we want to say we want to expand, we want to make our customer, satisfaction go from net promoter score of 1, let's say, I don't know, just making that up, or 80% or 60%. We want it to go to
for, and these are the ways we want to do it. That's an unsure outcome. We're going to try to do these things, and hopefully they result in increased revenues, but that is not a certain outcome. If that's the case, then more or less, we want to be clear that it is essential to get away from standard misconceptions about equating a strategic planning and a strategy development. So a strategy is not a plan. A strategy is not a vision. A strategy can be long-term. A strategy is not optimization purely, and a strategy is not adopting best practices. Why you do any of these things, it's not clear it will improve your market position. It may, but at the end of the day, it's very internal.
What strategies?
Why is it not? Tell me what a vision that you have heard.
Everything is a kind of still.
No, tell me a vision.
Some future, future choices that you think may be differentiated.
Microsoft vision is to provide information at your fingertips. That's their vision. That's not their strategy.
That's no, it's in line with what we have summarized as a strategy key element.
I know. That's the whole point.
It's not tested. You may think it is differentiating. It will be.
Yeah, but a vision is just the way, you know, I want to be like this. Okay, you can say a lot of things, but that's not making set of choices. I feel like I had two startups. There's one our logo, and we have actually framed it in the entrance of the company. It was a software company for map technology. It was called JS Trans. Set it up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And one of our vision was to dominate world domination in map technology. No, it's great. That's not vision. That's not a strategy.
Strategy for at least need a vision.
Yes. But I'm saying it's not important. And then long-term, short-term will come into play here. We will see how. But it's important because I think this comes up always. So I want to be clear at the beginning of what we're trying to do, right? Okay. Then Bijan have been hitting us on the head. What is not, what is not, what is not. So what is it? Okay. Strategy is what is your winning aspiration? How do you want to win in the market? Where would you want to play? Which market play is always in the market? And then how will you win if you do that? And then if you do that, what kind of capabilities you have to bring to bear? These are all choices you have to make. And it turns out each one of them will have implication for what you're going to do. But more importantly, everything here as an integrated set of questions, it's not certain that you will. Now, I want us to look at the Southwest case. I will kind of show it to you, and then we will walk through it. It's a discussion case. But basically, what I love about Southwest case, because it's been so much debated, so much written about, and most people know about it, is a company in the US. It's a regional airline. And what was funny is that when they entered the airline market, at the time, people thought that airline market is a very, very bad market to enter. It's a monopoly or a oligopolistic market. It has a heavy, it's like a lot like telecom market in the sense that you have to heavy investment in assets and heavy assets, right? And then you have little leeway to do things. So in a way, why would they do that? It turns out they had a theory about how to compete. And they started implementing that theory to see whether it works or not. And this is what's interesting, that you have a historical case of these guys came in, they had an untested set of assumptions, and now after they started doing it, the results are not bad. They have grown quite a bit, right? And of course, this growth helps us to
look at things. So in a way, they were aiming for a specific outcome and they had a theory, and yet now let's look at the case and then I want to discuss it. So shall we distribute the case? So what I like to do is, these are by the way, these are short cases designed for you to read in 5, to 7, 8 minutes. And then I would like to have you to discuss the end questions among yourself. And then after you've discussed them, then, more or less one person from the team kind of summarizes the discussion in answering the question. And then we will have at least 1 or 2 teams do this, and then we have a collective discussion. And that's the way I like to go. And then throughout the day, hopefully every team will have a chance to kind of discuss things. So let me set this off. So basically what I like you to do, you're going to read this, right? It's quickly about what the aspects of, what we discussed quickly. The first page we already went through, it's not much. And then the bottom of the page, we have what a strategy is all about choices. And then the second page is what's interesting, is what the South has tried to do and how do they try to compete. And then what do we think of that? And then at the end, I have these 2 questions that I'd like you to answer. The questions are, what do you think a strategy cannot be created equal? Rather, why do you think, maybe you think it is? And then I want you to reflect on Southwest strategy theory versus other airlines, right? And what you think you created for them. And then somehow then think back to your organizational unit and how would you apply these 4 questions? So let's have like about 8 minutes of reading and then another 5 minutes of discussion among yourself, and then we will start the report, okay? Would you like to go first? Let's just start with the first question. Yeah. Do you more or less, what do you think? Why do you think this cannot be equated? First of all, you agree with what? What was the discussion? I know you have a contrarian here. Obviously, must have been a productive discussion.
And for me, I agree with was said in this different, and we agree with that because I have another opinion. But definitely the strategy is not everything. And it's not because everything is the part of the strategy.
Good.
And it is not a plan because planning comes after the strategy. It's a detailed yes.
Good topic.
Yes, and it's not optimization, of course. And it's not a long term because the world is so fast moving, so we cannot have a long term strategy.
No, we can't.
We can develop maybe.
We can develop. So basically, it's the opposite. So if you don't agree, I want you to see why. So that's it. Maybe I didn't say that people say you can't have a strategy because things in the world change. So why have a strategy? My position is the opposite. You cannot, even the world is changing. You agree with that?
Like, amazing.
Absolutely, I didn't say anything about two. You have to choose the two, in a way, you can't.
Yes.
Should depend on your differentiators.
Yes, we finally are getting. We have a skeptic from person. We have to celebrate. He's gonna be invited to your wedding. Yeah, okay.
I have one last one. But I think strategy is very important. And we have-
Guys, ladies, listen, please.
To have a solid strategy, but at the end of the day, execution is the key.
There's so much. This is what I was going to say. So now you talked about that. Just tell me one thing that you want to highlight about Southwest.
Southwest,
With the question too, I want you to say one thing about that.
they were leaders in their field.
Yeah, but
Pick one of the questions. Why is this?
Other questions?
yeah, pick one question and tell me
Hmm. Okay.
one of the questions. How do,
What's their aspiration? What are their capabilities?
Hmm.
Just pick one.
Okay, I will pick, how will you win? The way you will win the children playing field. They went for, low cost fare and, they add more trips, in a day and, they worked on the turnaround time and, most
You don't know who everyone
important.
is. You're still the show contestant. I'd like you to focus on, so, because you use the word, you use the point that it says low cost first. Low cost first is not an input. Low cost first is an output. Which means that you're doing these other things,
Okay.
okay, and then that results.
Example, they went online, so they reduced the cost.
So online booking cuts down on booking costs.
Yes.
Big,
It resulted that they could afford to have a low cost.
low cost first. Okay, great, thank you. Now we're gonna go to other things. Thank you, this team, and thank you for converting. Okay, would you like to go next? I think there's some. With Southwest. Tell us some of the areas that you think they focused on and how they. What's their main aspect? Or how do they want, where do you want their,
In a high level, I think they were simple and non-negotiable,
why, why? You're still my show that thing later on. So non-negotiable complaint. So we want to focus on, I mean, no, these are ridiculous, but we want to focus on. And I like the fact that Claire is seeing the information, yeah, okay. Yes, I know it's simple.
they wanted to target low cost,
That's the out.
the outcome of that. How did they deliver that? They went from point to point.
One. So point to point, why is that such a big deal?
No transits, no loading, unloading, no crew.
Because other airlines were doing well.
They put
Hot and it's full. Point to point is counterintuitive. Why, if you do benchmarking, if you do best practice, what's gonna happen? You're gonna copy everybody else. These guys come along and they do point to point, and I'm sure somebody told them, you are crazy. You are going against conventional wisdom. Right? You are going to lose. And they're scratching their head. Is this really going to happen? We're going to lose. They may not. But that's the essence of making strategy. Why it has to be something that you believe is going to make a difference, but then it's not just a belief. You said execution. Execution is key. So now let's tease out what else did they do to make that happen.
They initialize their aircraft.
Well, thank you. 737. Why?
Common, surface part, common maintenance.
Imagine, let's say you have a fleet of cars. Let's say, you are, you are some kind of a company that fleet of cars, like rental car. If you have many names, Toyota, Chevrolet, all of this adds complexity creates problems for multiple parts, for multiple skills, all kinds of things, and now non-standard interface. So what does it do? This standardization helps you lower the complexity and cost. So you see now, we said winning aspiration, but now also we are saying that has to be translated into things you can do. This is one of them, right? So a standard aircraft point to point. What else?
They went on a shorter flights, less mileage.
Exactly. Short haul means that we fly from, let's say, Baltimore to Boston. We fly from, to Washington, D.C. So when it's too close, but you fly to Atlanta. These are all short haul. You don't need wide body. You don't need a lot of fuel because these are more or less make your cost low. Exactly. So you see what did we say? You need to have set of choices. You need to integrate. They can't all working counter each other. So it means that if you go for wide body aircraft has very different characteristics. So now we are starting to see how it comes together. Thank you for that. Thank you, Steve. Now, I want another team to tell us now more about how do you think if you were applying this in your organization or organization, how could this work? Which part would work? You're thinking that. Well, microphone. Where is the microphone? Please.
Of the winning aspiration, we think that the advantage, the edge of our advantage is to provide high quality service that focus on customer satisfaction and customer experience. This is the edge that we can compete with.
So
not the cost, like this company, for example.
interesting. So in other words, you think you can go and focus on quality of the product more than its cost.
Yes.
In other words, in a way, you don't want to be Hyundai, you want to be Mercedes, you want to be Lexus.
However, in the market that we don't compete, right? We have quality standards, and we have been providing for. This is our.
So highlight for me a little bit how you tie it back to the other things. In other words, this is your aspiration. Now you want to tie it back to what's happening on the ground. Equivalent of the hub and spoke versus point to point, equivalent of singular. Just highlight a couple of things.
In order to be able to do that, we need to focus first on providing more digital tools and online services to our customers that make their life more easier.
What would be an example?
The digital the e-shops that we have online shopping.
It's very
Part of providing high quality services, plus focusing on frontlines who are facing customers directly to train them to be very qualified and how dealing with our customers and how to solve the problems for them.
I like that. So in a way, you need to translate into things that if you are going to upsell to your customers these additional services, these people have to be trained. You can't just make it happen by itself. I send you the message, it will sell it.
You need to ask.
Absolutely, you need the skills have to get built. connecting that to the premium service. And therefore, what we want to be clear that we always emphasize and that service is key, as opposed to the fact that, well, because we are giving you something inexpensive, you can forgive us our service sometimes it doesn't matter. Very important. Yes. Yes. Well, you need to speak. Yeah.
I think the majority of there is segmentation. Southwest choose a segment of the company. That we take it in our organization, we have some segmentation. In our product like Cap, June, we choose a segmentation of customer. Here in Southwest, they choose the most point-to-point customer that is coming from international lanes to take one side to the point-to-point lanes. The other one, they choose the local destination here that about 180 or 130. Yeah, so we reflect that in our organization. We must look at the today. Yes, we are looking usually for segments. That segment for youth, that segment for expats, the segment for some people they are paying using data and do our own system.
I like that. So more or less, what you're saying is that you can segment the market in a way to fit the overall quality approach that you have. And then therefore, there are certain people who are likely to consume these services because of whatever reason. They could be high income, they could be because they are interested in you, even if they're not high income. For instance, gamers, they may not be high income, but they want to play games.
Therefore, they said as they have customer for LV, there is a customer for the copy of LV.
And what's LV?
Bring it on.
Oh, good. I should have known. On a professor salary, I can't tell you how much. What happened? The battery ran out. I think we need some help with this. Anyway, okay, thank you. This is good. Anybody else wants to add anything before I do my conclusion for this case? Yes. Yes. Where is the microphone?
So was nearly remained 6, 7 good. Different from the other company. And it seems like they succeed in all the options. Is it like?
What's the question?
Is it like, I mean, in real life, do we have that we say that this is my strategy, 6 kilo, 7 kilo, and all of them will work.
Okay, so that's a good point. I'm going to go to my conclusion and then do one. Yes. Because you want to connect them together. Because that's why I'm going to bring it up.
It is actually hard, no negotiable.
But you're still in my show. That's it. Okay. But don't forget your question, because the first part of your question was good. That you were saying, you were saying somehow the application you succeed there. That's not the point of making. Okay, we're in business. All right. So let us formalize some of these things. So basically, we have, this company is the key point about this company, and that's
That's the most important thing, right? And I think coming back to you, I'm not going to address it now, but we will do it later. The key for this company is they're combining these 5 factors or 4 factors or 6 factors. But the key thing is that the airplane in the air makes money. The airplane on the ground doesn't make money. Now, and you ask me, you tell me, Tijan, you should be given a Nobel Prize for saying that. No, because it's so obvious. I'm saying obvious. Why is it that other airlines don't focus on that? That's because they are making the choice. We make that the key aspect of our strategy, then everything has to feed into that. Now, we're going to next time, next topic, non-negotiable, we'll focus on this, but that's the key. Anything that compromises airplanes in the air, we have a problem. We have to make sure. And we will see that airplane in the air is key. And why nobody worries as much about that as Southwest Airlines? Because they made a conscious choice to make that the singular fact. If that's the case, then the way they do their fleet, right? Keeping planes in the air is key. That means more or less, we have to have a standard airplanes. We have to be able to taxi and get them off the ground as fast as possible. That means that more or less our fares at any point in time is usually about 1/3 cheaper than most other fares. So, and then what does that do for us? That helps us grow, right? We can get bigger and bigger and bigger, and we are able to succeed. So if you look at this short haul, less than 500 miles, point-to-point flight, a fleet of 737s, high frequency flights results in low fares. Yes.
These airlines or these things is the highest cost is the biggest one. Part of this because we have the standard.
Yes.
Only the same thing, but it is low.
Exactly. It's a point. In other words, you want to get, this is why we said integrate. They have to fit together because maybe in one aspect, maybe Airbus consumes less fuel. But if they fit together and it lowers your fuel consumption because you have lower drag, because you don't go as high as, for instance, other airplanes, then you have to, this integration is key, right? Remember, and it's not so much as you have to succeed in all of them, it's that all of them fit together, right? All of them. So, the other thing you want to learn from this is the other airlines have similar options. In other words, they are not the only ones that have access to it, right? Other people could do this, but somehow everybody enters the market and they think they're limited by what everybody else is doing. So in a way, what we're trying to say is that you need to kind of move away and be dominated by what other people are doing, right? So avoid the planning trap, which means that if you're going to compete, you have to accept a certain level of nervousness, a certain level of uncertainty. Angst means, should I do this? Should I not do this? Yes, it's uncertain. Therefore, good strategy, a good element of a good strategy is that there is uncertainty. Uncertainty means discomfort. Discomfort means you have to have ways of making sure you have worked out most of the things, and therefore you have analyzed, what we said, we have analyzed the market and we are pretty sure. Pretty sure doesn't mean sure. And then after you start and you tweak means, you said things may not be working, you adjust. So long term doesn't mean you're not tweaking. Yes.
Iteration.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I love it. You're not completely on board. I love it. So you want to also be clear that you want to be make this somewhat simple because simplicity makes it more what? Implementable. That's the beauty of what they have done over there. And then I would say most, answering the 4 questions ideally should pay on, if it fit on 1 page. But of course, I'm not saying that the details of aircraft maintenance manuals and things have to be on 1 page. I'm saying that your strategy, if it's 1 page, what's the advantage of having a 1-page strategy? Everybody understands it. From the top to the bottom. All the way to the CEO, to the doorman, everybody can understand. Yes.
Is it accepting times? More control?
The whole.
Accepting times. More controlling times. Accepting this accepting your more let's say positivity was all controlling that rather than just accepting, because accepting was something that you are trying to avoid, or try also to be positive. You can say controlling or mitigating, you can say maybe it's more relevant to what we are saying.
You're raising a good point. So let me amend what I said a little bit, or at least modify. What I mean by angst is that I am an optimist. I'm talking myself. When people say, "Oh, optimism, you're ignoring problems," relax. What I like to think of it as I work to find solutions to problems I find. And I always think I can come up with something, even if it's a little bit. That is what you're saying. So I accept what you're saying in a sense that angst maybe is a little negative, but it's a more positive attitude that, you want to keep morale up. I like that because you don't want to say, fine, we're going to completely want it, but we don't know if it's going to succeed, or we may die. No, that's not a good idea. The company CEO cannot say that, right? If the company CEO says that, we are dead on arrival, so we want to be very clear.
We can have another question on the same use case.
Yes.
For the Southwest. I think you can understand the strategy being low cost, I would say, operator, this while attracting a lot of new segments in the market, addressing the new potentials and all this. Very excellent, very efficient. But from the other side, was it affecting the quality of service? And what was the acceptance level? In the mindset of customers, to what level they were accepting that?
So what we want to be clear, has anybody in this ever? You can kind of contrast us because there's somebody with experience. Okay. No, but you're talking about service. He's saying, do people accept somehow, it doesn't affect the level of service. But some things do, like for instance, they charge you for every piece of laundry. I think it's like right. So yeah, and then they keep you by zone, they don't keep you at people. So what does that mean? That means that you're going for a segment, going back to what you said, that segment is okay, compromising some things.
You're managing their expectations.
Yeah, thank you.
That's right. You know what you're being provided and you're not expecting a lot. If I'm paying a lot, so you don't expect.
Yes, that's critical, right? I mean, now, they actually try to gamify it. Did you ever see the dance? Okay, so the ones I've been there, sure, that start dancing. Can you put on your seatbelt? Then they start doing this, like, not that deep, but more or less close to it. So more or less, they try to manage or like manage your expectations because they're saying more or less, we are different and all we're doing, we're fine. Don't expect to be treated like a, a king, because, you more or less are a passenger. And by kind of doing that, people accept certain level of what? It's not Louis Vuitton service, right? So that's the point. Okay, so that's a strategy is answering these 4 questions, and therefore we have a way forward. Now we're going to start moving now to strategy implementation. Now we have, I think we now have at least I would say not a perfect, but a good understanding of the fact that strategy is different from strategic planning. And now that we're clear, we have to kind of see what are the elements that makes a strategy successful, because those elements have to be there. And I'm happy, by the way, don't get me wrong when I'm telling you, don't steal my show. One of the best things that happens to somebody like me who's trying to provide additional knowledge to you is that you have read the material that you're trying to provide. I love it. It's good because it means you're thinking about what you read. So this is where the next 2 items come in. So it turns out that we need a way to articulate for ourselves that a strategy implementation, it sounds like I implemented a project. What we want to look at that is that it's not kind of true. It's not one time, it's ongoing. So I want to break this. At the end of this, I want to kind of put some almost like equivalent. It's not 100% equal, because a strategy has to be more or less done on an ongoing basis. How do we do that? By making sure a bunch of things happen. So the lesson I want to have as a starting point, let's see what you think of this. Does anybody know about what happened in the Battle of Ulm in 1805 in the border between Austro-Hungarian Empire and France? Okay, so I'm a history buff. I like history. So in 1805, Napoleon surrounded and about to attack the Austrian Empire, or at the time Austro-Hungarian Empire, and then basically they decided to make a pact. So between the Russian Empire and Austro-Hungarian Empire, and they the pact was that Russian troops would get to Ulm, this is where the tip of the battle is, by 20th of October 1805. And then Russian troops start moving. What is fascinating is that Austrians used to use the Gregorian calendar, the Russians used to use the Julian calendar, and guess what? Julian calendar lies 10 days behind. And then, of course, Russians did not arrive on time. And had a bad day, like 250. Yes. Now, the lessons after this. So, I want you to ask you, what's the cause of this? Poor communication versus nobody in charge. Number 3, no system or process. So I want to show of hands to see who thinks poor communication coordination is the primary. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. True. How many people think nobody in charge? 1, 2.
Many people are in charge.
Many people in charge? But you can't vote more than one. I thought you raise your hand. 3. Okay. Okay, I give you 4, 5. Okay. Number 3. no system or process in place. 1, 2, 3. Sure. Four, okay, 3. All right, obviously you see what I'm trying to get at. Because at the beginning, you kind of think, what the hell is going on? Why would this happen? A lot of reasons, but we want to focus on the primary reason, and I want to link it back to the strategy. So, if you have a strategy, your strategy is more or less by the way, uncertain, like you want to survive this war at a high level, or at least make sure, Napoleon doesn't win. But the point is that it's uncertain. So you put a bunch of things in place to make sure that happens. So you want to more or less have a way of your strategy has to be synchronized by what's happening on the ground. So this has to be that you have a bunch of processes, you have information technical infrastructure, and then that has to be connected to behavior and those things. So, ladies and gentlemen, are you willing not to modify what you thought your vote was in the last slide?
All of the above.
That's why I voted for all.
I like this. I like this. So if I put in place a pact, that pact has to be now translated into actions on the ground. The translation of that is like having an engine. You know how engine in a car, you have an internal combustion engine or electric works differently. Internal combustion engine more or less has a rotor, that rotor turns. And then you have a transmission belt. The transmission belt translates the motion onto the shaft. The shaft transfers it into the wheels. That transmission belt has to be working. If I say we have a pact and you need to arrive on the 20th of October, the transmission system has to be working. That means systems, processes, roles, behaviors, all kinds of things. It can't be just like that. So a strategy in the head is good. A strategy in the CEO and the C-suite boardroom or mind is good, but it has to be now brought to the ground. And if you don't do that, you can have General Max situation. So what we want to be thinking about is that we don't want to end up like that. Therefore, for us, translating that into modern company environment, we want to connect the strategy to the value chain, i.e. the way to organize your activity inside the company to do things that is beyond functions. You can have administration, finance, engineering, IT, etc. The point is you need to connect those activities with a strategy. And then this has some connection to what the infrastructure that you have in place. And then this has to be organically connected. Organically means that things have to work together. Guess what? That wasn't obviously the case when they made this pact. So now, in order to visualize this for us so that we understand it really better in our context, not in a war context, let's say I'm interested in a simple value chain. A value chain usually consists of any set of activities that you undertake, and more or less, I'm going to make this an example because it's simple and I have looked at it and it's a graphics that I have for it. Obviously, excuse me if this is too simple, but you can break down any value chain into a set of activities that you perform. And if I'm in a bike rental, more or less situation, I want to rent a bike to a customer. I greet the customer and determine his or her needs. Then I rent a bike and they return the bike and they pay. So more or less, this is very generic. If that's what I do, then I can do this in a low-cost way, or I can do this in a premium way. Let's walk through what a low-cost way means for customer experience. So I want to connect that to what's going on in the customer experience versus what's going on in the process that underpins or supports this customer experience. Let's say I walk in and I say, I'm looking at the person behind the counter, and the customer, the clerk says, you want to buy? And what's the supporting process? It's just him or her behind the counter. Next, determine need. Customer experience looks like something like this. Bikes are over there, help yourself. What does that mean? That means that somehow I want to prevent theft, which means that more or less they're up there either chained together or locked together or something like that, but not much beyond that. Then rent the bike. I say, well, buddy, fill out this form, bring it to me, and you're done. All this means is that I have some printed forms are literally in a shoebox, although not literally, to be a very, very simple, computer system. And then afterwards, okay, now that you've finished using the bike, this is the customer experience. Okay, now you have to pay me the fee, and then implement it more or less. Implication in terms of supporting process is that there is a shoebox rental form. Maybe there is credit facility, maybe there is a cash receipt system. Bottom line, this is very simple value chain. Why? Because the customer experience is somewhat simple. Now, let's go to a more premium version. Same activity value chain, right? In the premium part, look at the customer experience. Hello, Mrs. Henry. Wonderful to see you again. Somehow I asked the name, and then I have entered my name, my name into the computer system I have, and I said, by the way, last time you rented Wonder Bike 5.0, and is this the thing you want or not? And then what does that say about the supporting system? It means that I have a customer tracking and past sales activities. You immediately see there is an implication between the customer experience and the supporting process. Remember the previous slide I said this has to be constructed organic. Next, determine the need. I think the Wonder Bike Supreme would be better choice for you this time. Implication of the process is that I have trained my customer, like we said, that they have to be able to upsell, right? And somehow treat the customer well, right? You don't want to tell them, by the way, you get this. Very rude. You would not in the rental car companies, you tell them, by the way, we hope you want to, for a small fee, we can help you. That's a very, very important element of customer treatment that your employees to be scripted into a script interacting with. Red bike. Okay, let me just scan the bike's number into the system, and then I'll adjust your seat. That's the customer experience. Again, implication of that customer experience is we have an home automated inventory system that checks out the bike automatically by scanning the barcode. A whole infrastructure from a technical and information part has to go in line with that. And the company personnel must know about that too. Finally, return bike and pay. Look at the customer interaction. How is your ride? Here, let me help you. I just scanned the bike's tag again and have your paperwork in just a second. Would you like a beverage, by the way? Would you like me to put this on your hotel bill in Crown Plaza? Would you prefer for it now? What's the implication? Of course, this inventory system also checks in and then more or less can automatically see. Second, it prepares the payment document, and potentially you're also tying into the hotel billing system next door. Well, guess what? This customer, this process fits in with customer experience, and therefore the same value chain can be what? Premium or low cost. What's the moral of the story? Moral of the story is that you need to understand how do you translate your strategy into a repeatable set of business processes and a learning system. Why? That's key to bring the strategy into life. So. First, your business strategy as a set of differentiators, in this case, whatever your service elements are driving the way you organize and the way you support them. In other words, this value chain is supported by a set of processes. And then, not only that, in addition, the strategy differentiators also require you to have a set of infrastructure and information. This means that now I have a harmonious system going together. So imagine if Austro-Hungarian Empire had that going for it in connection with our friends in Russia. Obviously, they didn't, so that's why they lost. So now that we are clear about this, I'm going to move into the things you read in your article. And that's where this comes to life. It turns out that a good strategy, if it's to be aligned, must consist of a set of differentiators, which drive the value chain infrastructure. That has to be translated into a small set of non-negotiables in practice, and it has to also be translated into a robust learning system. Any question here before I proceed further? And I discuss how do you establish each? Are we doing for time? Yes, this is perfect timing, actually. Good. Should you really? The first part is about the strategic differentiators. So I think this is somewhat clear. The point is that you always want to understand that any strategy has to be seen in the eyes of the customer clearly, right? So the thing about the Southwest discussion was that we didn't discuss that as a more or less as clearly as possible. We discussed the elements that take together make your strategy. Now we want to be clear that you must have something that the customers see. When the customers see that, then you have them coming towards you, right? Now, and I think this is best described as an example. So Vanguard is one of those companies that provides investment advisory as well as investment fund management. It's one of the largest, actually, I think the second largest after Blackstone. So AUB, the pension fund, for instance, is managed by Vanguard. So a lot of large companies, pension funds are managed by. Why people go there? Because if you are a rich person, you don't go to Vanguard. You go to, Morgan Stanley, or you go to boutique investment advisor, and you say, by the way, I have like $20 million or $5 million I want to invest. What do you advise me? They don't do that. No concierge service. One size fits all, more or less. Three size fits all. So they provide an index fund, several index funds. Basically, they say these are the packages of the companies we invest in. This is the typical return they get. This is the other one, and this is the third one. And what they advertise is that because we are good at what we do, we return to you above average return because our baskets are more or less balanced portfolios. So now you understand that in the eyes of the customers, that's clearly distinguished that I want to get return, and I know that I'm not going to get concierge service. It's not a Louis Vuitton service at all. It's vanilla, basic. What we want to take out of this is that these differentiators have to be clear in the mind of the customer. If they're not clear in the mind of the customer, then you'll be on top. Tetra Pak is another example. In the eyes of the customer, Tetra Pak is a company that provides all kinds of packaging They can do custom packaging, they can do a standard packaging. And they're market leader, and actually they have penetration almost all over the world. They're very active in the Middle East as well, and this is their bread and butter. But what's fascinating is that they say that packaging must save more than it costs. Interesting. So now, for them, they keep telling that to their customers. Second, it must outlast the product. Then it becomes something that they live by, and it's clear to the customers. This is something that a lot of companies have difficulty articulating. IKEA is another example. I think there's IKEA on the way from the airport to here that I noticed. There is one in Jordan. Basically, home furnishings that are affordable. One element of affordability is that these are, from the eyes of the provider, they're cheap, they're presentable, but they are not rush boudoir. This high-end furniture store that, one of the items costs the price of a car. So this becomes something that companies have to be clear about. What's their differentiator? These guys don't compete with rush boudoir. They compete in their segment. Going back to what Hamdi said, the segment is key. And therefore, differentiator is something that we must be clear what we are putting out there. However, we want to be clear. What I just said to you sounds like it's all about economics. It's not only about economics. It's about other things. And it's not only about the strategic positioning, about segmentation. And it's not only about value chain and infrastructure. You must be very clear that what do these differentiators mean for your customers, and then you have to be able to translate these into what I call prerequisites and outcomes. In other words, prerequisites is what is an input into providing this, and the outcomes is what the customers see. So for us, we want to be clear that alignment, this is one element of alignment, and it's a key one, but it's not enough. That's why we have the triangle. But triangle alignment now has to be complemented. It turns out differentiators depend on more. And obviously, you see where I'm going with this. Hopefully, is that I am starting to inch my way towards non-negotiables. It's an interesting term. I'm sure most of you knew about it before you read the article, but you probably didn't have a good name for it. Zook and Allen, they are from Bain Consulting Company, and you know what consultants are good for? They package something in a nice way and they sell it to you for a high price. And of course, you write a Harvard Business Review article, and then not only that, it rings true. What's my non-negotiable? Yeah, I have non-negotiable, but I never thought about it. But implicitly in my head, I used to think, yeah, we can't compromise on that. We can't compromise on this other thing too. But then you cannot have a lot of things you cannot compromise on, because that means it's meaningless. Remember, it's like the word strategy. So what is it? It's the things that make the company's core principles and strategy, right, happen online in terms of frontline behavior and how do you do business. In other words, it's prescriptions, routines, and behaviors, and these have to be connected to the differentiators. But then what does it mean in practice? It means that I cannot day in and day out come in and say, by the way, you don't have to do this. Although I said you have to do it. No. And by the way, we can kind of have a workaround. And by the way, we can change the behavior. It's not possible. In military terms, this is where it originates. By the way, a couple of these these all have military origins because military has been one of the people who more or less worries about organizations, right? Why?
Using better.
Hmm?
They will use the better.
If everybody start doing their own thing, you have a problem. So military people, by the way, a lot of organizational behavior research is funded by the military because they worry about this day and day. At night, it keeps them up, right? What if they don't execute the order? They have a problem. What if this happens? What if that happens? On the other hand, the opposite. What if they don't respond properly and they start executing what they shouldn't have because they're used to doing the same thing and they actually are facing a novel situation. So they came up with the notion that you need to worry about the fact that our intent as a strategy has to be clear, but what do we translate that into things that more or less on the ground, things take place without compromising what the essence of the strategy is. It turns out you need to specify what it is that cannot be compromised. If everything cannot be compromised, then that's not a good strategy. And on the other hand, if everything can be compromised, then that's not a good strategy. So it turns out we have somewhere in the middle that we have to worry about what is a non-negotiable. And what I like you to kind of think about is the case that we're going to discuss now, the case of Air Liquide, the French company. We're going to do it like the Southwest case. I like you to quickly read this and then discuss it among yourselves. And then we're going to have a collective discussion. So, can I have you please read this quickly for like 5, 7, 8 minutes? And then read the case of what this project that Air Liquide is trying to implement. And then at the end, I like you to answer these 3 questions similar to these 2 questions like we did before. So I like you to reflect on how and why Air Liquide established its non-negotiables, right? And then would an ad hoc way, meaning not having non-negotiables of a strategy alignment between the top, middle, and front line would have worked for them? Why not? It's very important because it kind of crystallizes what we're talking about. And then maybe you start thinking about what in your organization, can you reconstruct things from the past to see if you had non-negotiables and you were not articulating them, or if you had articulated them, they would have worked better. Or maybe there are candidates for non-negotiables in the future we can think of. So let's just start, more or less in this two-part approach discussing this. So please read it and then discuss it among yourselves. And I would like you to more or less 5 minutes reading, 5 minute discussion, please. So let's do that. You have a hard time communicating to the front line. What's our strategy, right? And then you cannot be there for whatever it is. If they have to come back to you for every decision, you have a critical problem, right? Exactly. Good, good. I love it. I love it. Absolutely. You can teach the course next time. I love it. Tell us.
And the first question was about why and how we have it been established as non-negotiable. So the answer is to ensure that the organization is aligned and to avoid making decisions and controlling. The other question was.
So let's break this down, right? So basically, what we want to make sure, we want to make sure that the strategy is translated into things that work. And then it turns out this company is a very major company. Then they had a new, tell us, the new CEO, and then they were doing this stuff. Okay, tell us.
He discovered the manager was making a trade-off. So he would reduce the customer quality service or customer.
But walk us through. So it says the manager was presenting a restructuring plan, right? And then he was transferring his production to the factory in Germany. And in the plan, what happened? He showed that one.
During 6 months, his forecast was to have a deterioration of customer service.
And then they will improve it. Exactly. Before, not improve. So what the CEO said.
He was surprised. He was surprised that we have something that in the decrease in customer satisfaction. And why the manager arrived and concluded.
Right, he's asking, are you serious? And how dare you? Yeah, so it's asking, do you think this is acceptable? And then what is the response?
It seems for him very obvious for the manager. Do the math. It's simple, math very accurate.
But walk us through it. The CEO's office had only given 2 instructions. But more move the factory production offshore and make it cash flow. And then the only way he can do this was to cut the term. He told the CEO, you do the math. You are the CEO. Why are you paying this money? Big salary, big fat check. So, and then CEO realized that what?
You realize that, the person or manager that was presenting is making a trade-off with a non-negotiable, at least for the non-negotiable for the CEO value, which is the customer satisfaction, that should increase the price.
So let's see. In other words, he's starting to scratch his head and says, if I'm sending these messages down the line, obviously comes the message from the CEO. And then you can't say, by the way, it's like what we said, commander's intent. Can't say, by the way, let's not execute this one. Let's execute the message. No, you're not option. So if I get this new direction, what am I to do? So CEO realized unless there is something in place that says, by the way, whatever the direction down, you guys need to balance it against this other directive. If you remember the Terminator, the movie Terminator, like one of the things in the Terminator was, don't kill the guy who wrote the program. Right? So in this case, bottom line, don't kill the company by making the service commercial out. But then how do you articulate? So tell us what you articulate.
You mean how the CEO?
Yeah, it says so and non-negotiable is simple. It's a contract. Right.
If we force them to make any trade-off to achieve the objective, they should raise it to the CEO or the CEO.
It means from now on, you have to be clear if there is a contradiction, you either revert back to this directive that you exist as a non-negotiable, or else you kick it up the chain of command, but not for everything. Right? That becomes key. So if you were to read the next paragraph, what do you get out of it? Can you read it out loud for the whole class?
For example, the non-negotiable is we will only plan for increasing customer service level, never something we will increase. If that factory manager has this situation, we should have points, we will say, do you know your own funds department has issued two separate instructions? To mean that will force me to decrease customer service level. What do I do?
So now the aspect of the non-negotiable becomes clear. Because non-negotiable goes to the core of what you buy. And the core of what you're different offering somehow becomes problematic. If I start executing these other commands. So CEO's response is what? If a real non-negotiable is in place and somehow this come up, no way, Jose. And now we're starting, I feel like I start to appreciate that a non-negotiable is your intent and how you're going to serve your customers. And it's a directive that has to be more or less what translated into something that people understand. So in a way, we will only plan for increases in our customer service level, never a static, never decreasing. Wow. Let that sink in, because how many times have we seen this situation ambiguously come out? Ambiguous means that it's unclear. It's in fact, and sometimes even it's clear. So therefore, for us, we want to avoid this. And this becomes the first one. And second, the response would be something like this that can come down. But most of the time, the first one is operating. So now what does happen?
I maybe say something.
Yes.
Usually what from my experience. Yes, these big value, these pillars, non-negotiable people are stated like that. Okay.
Are they?
Experience, customer experience should not decrease. That's static or should be. Or should increase, but with a reasonable cost. And now I figure it's not clear, it's not simple to understand, because you put together finance with customer satisfaction.
I like that. So what are we saying now? And that is always
Not clear. And not simple to understand, because at the end, it is a discussion all the time. What does it mean, a reasonable cost? Reasonable for me is not all the time
So, but let's compare that with the lack of that. First of all, if that wasn't in place, there would be no trade-off in the first place. At least in your case, the trade-off is clear. So, first of all, we want to be clear that having this non-negotiable is more or less puts a bar in place. This is the bar we have to pass. It turns out, now that you come to make the decision, so I want to be clear that if you leave today, you should start thinking about at the end of the day that we should have clear non-negotiables at least in our head. And then we have to raise it with our manager or higher up. And not only that, we should have this to be stated explicitly. Explicitly is key here. Now, Abdelhadi raising an interesting point in saying that, but still I come to certain situations that
I have a hard time living by that. Because in a way, it's difficult in this situation to make that choice. And then he's saying what? Not clear means that what? I like this silence, because these people are thinking, and I can hear you. So how? Yes.
I think there one thing, there is no, let's say, 100% alignment on the full benefits.
Of the resolution. I like that.
Yeah, the CEO has 100%.
So there are situations that call for top management intervention. But what's interesting is that 100%. So now the question becomes, there are situations where non-negotiable, we can go to the. But not be negotiable. You can't just compromise and say, "Bah, it's okay." Can't do it. Now, it's not. That's a big difference. That says that you come into situations on a daily basis that somehow, it is not 100% achievable. But you see now what you have created for yourself in a good way. You've created a baseline you won't go below. And you've created some elbow room that from 100% to 80%, whatever it is, and of course, percent, you're making it easy, but maybe it's not like that. But bottom line, what you're saying is that we can't do a blanket, just get rid of it, but there is wiggle room. We can kind of maneuver our way into this. That's good way of thinking. And you're thinking very good. In other words, you have negotiables, non-negotiables, but you're not rigid in a way that grinds everything to a halt. Because rigid non-negotiables should be problematic. But you created something and you say at the top there is bigger. And then of course, in some cases, you gotta budget. You gotta recommend. Why? You have a big account. This account, brings a lot of bill, a lot of revenue, and then, more or less, you're asking for certain things that you usually provide. So let me give you an example. In Lebanon, we have this juice called Balis. I don't know if you heard of it. It's fresh orange juice. They started making it in 2000. They're very successful now. And, in the Middle East, we have a lot of places that they make fresh juice on the street, right? You can go and get a fresh juice, any kind of juice. And they have weird names, tutti frutti, juicy frutti, I know all kinds of variations of that. I'm sure actually, I know you have them in Jordan. But it turns out the shelf life for the fresh juice is maximum 3 days. Afterwards, it tastes like vinegar. It doesn't matter. Right? In other words, you're drinking, you feel like, what is it? Wow, it's weird. So, Balis has started doing flash pasteurization of fresh oranges. Because remember, this is fresh oranges. You can have concentrated oranges. It lasts almost a year. But fresh oranges last with flash pasteurization 21. They will take to the market, and there is a market for this. It's pricey, not as pricey as fresh juice, but still pricey. But people go for it. Guess what? A lot of high-end restaurants came to Balis and said, "We want you to serve the juice in our hotel and restaurant." But we are getting complaints from guests. Your flash pasteurization alters the taste. Can you eliminate the flash pasteurization? Guess what the response of Balis? Can't do that. Why not? You morons are getting ready for revenue. We're giving you revenue and you're saying no.
You have the process and the fact.
They can't risk people getting poisoned or otherwise because that's non-negotiable. Remember, we said the strategy has to draw out and circle. There are things you will do inside the circle, there are things you won't do. So another function of a non-negotiable is it actually clarifies things for you, right? And then most companies would be, and I remember this discussion because I worked with this company, it's a Baidoon family. They are now moving into other juices, by the way, all kinds of juices. But the point was, the salespeople were saying, "But this is bringing revenue." You guys are saying no. The point is, we are uncertain about these products, outcome. And then food is something that the reputation is on the line. If the word gets around, Baidoon juice, by the way, it's awful, we poison 100 people in this wedding. That's dead end, right? You are finished. So you want to be very clear, the function of a non-negotiable goes to not other parts of the organization. Great, now let's answer the second part of the question. The team in the back, you guys want to answer the second part? You want to think about what in your organization? Can you think about how can you rethink something you've done in the past? Yeah. Is there some things that when you think back, they would have been thought non-negotiable if you didn't follow? Let's empower, yes. Where is the microphone? Two microphones, yes.
I noticed that, for example, from experience, because we are teaching.
Guys, listen, please. Yes.
That, for example, sometimes large accounts. Large account, for example, was terminated because of a small invoice. While it should be, for me, not negotiable that large account like this. So it should be not able to terminate a small version of the invoice. But them while they are a part of our revenue or the most important thing.
It's an excellent example. In other words, we should put safeguards in place in terms of these are computer systems, right? You want to have in the computer system a flag that says if the account is more than X, you should consult X or something other than that. That's very important. That's an excellent example of a non-negotiable because you don't want to fall into this trap of shooting yourself in the foot by things that you're executing. Why? You know this is important, but somehow people are not closing the loop. Yes. I want to tell you something. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, that's
Don't worry, I'm not intimidated at all.
No, we have something not negotiable like we have a period of direct customers, digital customers, and pushing our activities on the digital channels. Other clients are pushing for migrating customers to digital customer and still through the digital channels. But because we have a target, how we are achieving this target is the issue. Because the target is not negotiable. Which impacting the way how we are working by keeping the prices, which kill other channels in order to achieve the target. Where we even think at this stage of transformational period, the focus will be the quality of how the customers that digital world instead of achieving targets.
I like that. But can you elaborate, for instance, what are you, for instance, I think what you're saying is that the how of digital, that's something that's built in this 20%. In other words, the goal has to be achieved, but then we cannot alienate the customers so they walk away. So what is it that you think? Tell us, because you're overthinking.
What I meant from my example is that we have a target to achieve on selling products over our online channels. How to achieve that is through anything. The target is not negotiable. Do it anyhow. Just keep this target in which sometimes we go to kill the price in order to achieve this target. And this in fact have like channels and it destroy take on different channels in order to achieve one target to one channel.
I like that. So you see what I was saying is like Netflix has a more or less internal dictum or maxim or the slogan. They say at the end of the day, you need to figure out if what you're doing is in the interest of Netflix. Right? And I think you have to figure out, well, sometimes you may do things that are questionable and then is it right or not, but then they give you the freedom more or less to do that. And I think that's what you're pointing out. But I like the example, because the example says that sometimes these goals themselves are clear, but how to get there is somewhat vague. And I think that vagueness should be also interpreted judiciously. Judiciously means that you can't just do anything, but you can do some things, right? You cannot do other things. Again, my goal is not to tell you we have a formula for non-negotiables. In every context, you have to develop your own non-negotiable. But I would really think strongly that having clearly thought about your non-negotiable allows you to compete better. Right? But it competes better in the market by virtue of the non-negotiable. A liquid competes in a more systematic way, able to say no to something, yes to other things. Remember, at the end of the day, that's what it is. And if your strategy is so generic that you say yes to everything, you have a problem. If your strategy is so generic, you say no to it, that's going to harm something. And that's the difference. Okay? Yes.
Okay, I fully understand the importance of having basic principles, non-negotiable items that we have to agree on. It creates the needed alignment and all these stuff, clarity and vision. But I see it from the other angle as well. And I see that having 20% negotiable outside item creates a challenge between things. And for example, when I sit with on the hand as a financial controller, okay, and for myself and as a business, with, for example, myself, talking about the targets, we agree that we have to make the growth. We agree that we have to make this, for example, market share, for example, shelf share and all these stuff. We agree on those basic principles. But to create a challenge that I have to challenge myself to explore new segments, explore new markets. Maybe the company has to think differently of, for example, having some trade-offs between the increase of the sales to the benefit of compensating part of also, for example, revenue and being a short period. So it entices, I would say, the third challenge. And I see positivity sometimes having non-negotiable items, it's fully understood, but having negotiable items. On the other hand, it entices the operational tactics challenge between teams. It emphasizes that if we have to communicate more, that we have to sit with other more. One, because we all agree on the basic principles to the benefit of our organization. We all agree on the vision and the tactics. But maybe we should not 100% agree on the operational needed tactics to achieve that big target, which is very healthy.
So let me. Yes, I'm going to violently agree. Which means what? Which means that If you have more than a few non-negotiables, I have a problem with the way you're formulating this. It's not right. Therefore, I will draw a circle around a few things and then everything else becomes negotiable. And in a way, it's not bad.
Yeah.
Okay. But be clear that if you don't have these, right, it's a problem. And let me, now, this is a good time to show you the video. Let's hope this works.
People in our culture, that were really different, not just from other airlines, but from most businesses. As far as the tangibles are concerned, Boeing will sell you an airplane if you've got the resources to buy it.
I don't know how to increase the volume.
Space at the airport. In other words, all the tangible things are available to competitors, to other carriers. The thing that's really hard to match is the
Oh, here, it's okay.
spirit of the people from Southwest Airlines.
Things in our people are first, the customer, most important customer. Our passengers are second most important customer, and our shareholders are third. That's a big one, maybe for a Fortune 500 company, but
If you get altruistic people, if you get people that want to serve, and if you provide them an environment where they can be themselves, then you'll have a tremendous amount of dedication to it.
Anyway, sorry, the video is not working. Let me just tell you what he says. He basically says,
We were going to get people out of the automobile, get them off buses.
he says that everybody approaches us and tells us that we should be providing the market with better service. And one of the things they say we should do, we should offer business class service, because business class has much higher margin. It's non-negotiable for them. The other that precludes business class. It's not that they don't like to offer business class. Business class violates the fact that keeping the plane in the air becomes problematic. At least 1.5 times, 50% higher. So for us, what I want you to walk away is that they have very few non-negotiables, but they know everything else. It's just, in a way, it's very important to package it. By the way, it requires technical. Because in a way, you can't sit in the morning and say, oh yeah, this is the list. Operationally, you have to think of it operationally and think a linkage to your strategy and see whether this works or not. I feel like you have to be clear that you can't just make it up, right? It's specific to each company and how you compete and where you go. I want to be very clear about that. So I'm agreeing with you. So Herb Kleher says basically, in this case, we are happy to say no, the same way Belize said no, right? That's the point. Okay. Now, robust learning system. What is the other part of the spectrum? How are we doing? Okay, we have 10 more minutes. So we'll do this and then we'll do the case after lunch. I will tell you what it means and all of that, and then you come back after lunch and you start on the case so that it's all set to go. So basically, now the other part of this is that you more or less you can have your differentiators and you can have the non-negotiables, but somehow you have to feed that back. And it's interesting that we are often good at coming up with our differentiators, but we are not often that good at feeding it back and seeing what's happening on the ground. Again, this is what the uncertainty comes from. We want to take our net promoter score by 20%. People who say, will you refer somebody else to us? And you always, this is a very simple measure of customer service.
How do we do that? By having a robust learning system. Robust learning system, the essence of it, basically has been deployed by a lot of people. The article uses example of Hilti, which is a high-end tool manufacturer. And the way basically they do is that they go and they look at how people use their tools. And based on those, the way people use them, they keep coming up not only with improvements in the system, in the products, but come up with the new products. For instance, they watched how people do a lot of the time spent in typical construction site is by measurement. Based on that, they developed a laser measurement system, which basically saved people a lot of effort. But let me tell you where this comes from. This comes from this, what we call the OODA loop. What is the OODA loop? OODA loop stands for the fact that you basically have a way of, observing what's happening in the field. Then you orient what you're going to do next. Then you make a decision, and then you start acting. It turns out that this is a good way to characterize what happens in a typical situation with human beings and organizations when they're trying to look at a phenomenon. Of course, this comes from this pilot who was put in charge of thinking about. It was very strange what had happened in Korean War, that American airplanes or Allied airplanes were actually inferior to the Russian airplanes. But somehow, most of the air war was more or less accomplished in favor of the allies of the Americans. And that was puzzling. How is that possible? And it turned out the way it's possible is that the way the design of the airplane is not so much that it was more advanced or not, right? It had two major advantages. First, it had better visibility to the outside. What does that do? That helps you to see what's going on. And second, it had these controls that you can change tactics faster. So one is information. Second, you can change tactics faster. This means that more or less, as you face a situation, you are able to feed back the information, you orient your actions, you get the data, and you start acting. It turns out the speed of the decision-making is key to making differentiators and non-negotiables work in your favor. How does that work? By virtue of having something robust. Robust means what? Robust is opposite of what? Fragile. So robust means that you want to respond well, and pilots in a dogfight in the air definitely needs to have a robust system. It turns out in business we also look for a robust system where we learn from what is happening on the ground and we feed that back. And therefore, it becomes critical for us to think of this robust learning system as an integral part of what? The three components. You have the differentiators, you have the non-negotiables, but now you must feed back and then you must do corrections. So, yeah. Yes, 100%. It's like what we said about dinosaurs. What made dinosaurs go out of what? They didn't adapt, right? So bad OODA loop. No OODA loop. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, and maybe we'll give you a couple of more minutes even to get your packing done and checking out, is that I'm going to show you the next case we're going to do. The next case is about this OODA loop, but also what we use the case of Apple. So let me show you the actual case.
So this kind of talks about this, and then what I like you to do after, so this is after we come back, please, we would leave these for you here, and then more or less you read about the case of how Apple basically started implementing its example of robust learning system. Why am I not showing? Hold on. I thought I'm showing this on the screen. Sorry about that. Stop share. Okay, good. Okay, sorry about that. So what we're going to look at this case of the OODA loop, right? And then you're going to kind of look at this Apple, when Apple has started having its showrooms. By the way, Apple only has started having showrooms after they introduced iPhone. Why? They realized that typically they've been a computer company and they had not relied on this, but then afterwards they decided to go and establish a store, and their employment count went through the roof over time. What's interesting is that they started doing these things, but an integral part of this was being able to collect data based on this concept of a Genius Bar, Net Promoter Score, a store level data collection, and online data collection. And then the way, the CEO talks about this is fascinating. So what I like you again, after you come back from packing, checking out, and doing your lunch, please go through and read this and then try to answer this question. So reflect on experience of why and how Apple create their own robust learning system and feedback loop, and then think about why potentially an ad hoc way, i.e. no robust learning system of feedback would have worked for us. Why not? And then how would you think, have you maybe have implemented already an RLS, robust learning system, or maybe you have not, but how could this work for you? Okay, so we're gonna leave these things for you, and that this is the natural time for us to break. President, is that okay? We're right at 12:48. See you in 1 hour.
This is closed loop
Yes.
control system.
Yes, exactly.
I studied it too.
Exactly.
If you want to regulate the state.
Absolutely. Totally. You're right. Very much so. Now, the mechanics of this is different. Obviously, all feedback loops are like, the mechanics.